You can change almost everything about who someone is by changing their brain. Their entire personality will change if you mess around with their frontal lobe. Lobotomies used to do this. A little needle scraped around the frontal lobe and half your personality was gone. If we remove your hippocampus, you will no longer be able to form any new memories of your experience. I can mess around with another part, and the way you experience the world will change. But no matter what I do, it'll still be you experiencing the world, nobody else. You may have a totally different personality, but you will still be experiencing. Until I mess with enough that either you die or black out forever. So, since you can change everything about yourself by changing the brain, it begs the question, if you really aren't yourself, what part of your experience are you? Well, in a past video we've talked about how your conscious experience is really an illusion caused by the brain creating a simulation of a self interacting with a simulation of a world. But what separates your illusion from my illusion? If all these simulations are happening in both of our brains, why aren't the two illusions combining? What is the core component that separates me from you? Why can't we meet up in a dream? Theoretically, if you put all the same connections as are in your brain into my brain, I would think I'm you. And I would experience life as you experience life. But while this process might have destroyed all my memories, it is still me experiencing life, just from the perspective of you. So we have to ask ourselves, what is this me that is still here experiencing the world after all the previous neural connections have been switched to a copy of your neural connections? In terms of brain cells, the me is my collection of synapses that are experiencing the world. If a new synapse develops, I can have a new experience. When a synapse gets lost, that experience can no longer occur. More synapses can be conceived as a more full experience. Now, the synapses change in their pattern of activation, which can change how you experience. When you do drugs, for example, you experience the world differently, but it is still you experiencing. But within those synapses, there is one binary option: on, aka information that translates into experience, or off, the lack of information, simply put, not experiencing. Now, if you have ever been drunk, you know that it's really more of a spectrum, where you can be more or less in the moment. Drink enough and you'll black out completely. You're still awake, your brain is still making decisions and you're still doing things, but you are not experiencing anymore. This conceptualization of experiencing, which you can comprehend as simply not being blacked out, is where the me of the experiencing machine is. Imagine a soul. It is exactly the same as every other soul, and it does nothing but experience its surroundings. Then, it is put into a brain. This brain may have an amygdala that is prone to anger, or a frontal lobe that is bad at inhibition. But as far as the soul is concerned, it just experiences the world through the brain it is in. And that world includes the brain itself. Now, in reality, the equivalent of the soul in this metaphor would be the aspects of the brain that experience input. And while we all may have different brains that experience input differently, at the core of all of our brains, we are the same process, a machine that experiences. Let me explain it another way. Let's do a thought experiment. In place of a soul, imagine a video camera. Now, some cameras may have larger lenses than others, and each camera's lens can itself adjust in size. But besides the physical size of the lens, every camera is the same. It records the same way, and it is either on or off. So where did these cameras come from? Well, in the early years of the universe, different pieces were floating around, but eventually on Earth, the conditions were just right for the pieces to come together to create the camera, simply because it was possible. But now imagine that each camera has a bunch of extra lenses screwed in on top of the standard lens, that each lets in different wavelengths of light, and no two cameras have the exact same lens. So while the cameras would record everything the same, since they're covered each by their own unique extra lenses, they each record a somewhat unique video. Now imagine that each camera has attachments. There are attachments that make the camera charge more efficiently. There are attachments that store memory. Each camera can see some of its own attachments, but not always all of them. So there are attachments that are mirrors so that other cameras can see themselves. And some of these attachments are heavy, some are light, some drain battery fast. And these attachments basically function by themselves. The camera itself can't give any output. It just experiences input. Now the input also goes to a very common attachment that analyzes the input and tells the other attachments what to do. This attachment, let's call it the analyzer, can add other attachments, but it itself is just an attachment. It's not part of the core camera. And none of the cameras choose any of their attachments. Either the moment they existed, the attachments were put on, or they were gradually put on by other cameras, or their own analyzer. Now some of these attachments are knives, and when they're paired with a certain analyzer, they will end up stabbing other cameras, which is horrible. But what is the solution to this? Once we've protected the cameras that were stabbing victims, or in the worst situation, those cameras have been broken beyond repair, at this point, should we tear apart the camera that did the stabbing? That's what justice is, right? An eye for an eye. But somehow this seems wrong. After all, that camera didn't choose the knife. That camera didn't choose the analyzer that was attached to it. It didn't choose any of its attachments. That camera simply had bad luck in receiving shitty attachments. If possible, it seems almost obvious that what we should aspire to do is fix the analyzer, such that it won't be a risk to other cameras anymore. See, I prefer to think of us as machines instead of monsters. This is empathy, understanding that we are all the same underneath all the attachments. And what we all are, at the core of our brains, are machines that experience. All life is unified by the act of experiencing. Every organism is just a different model of the experiencing machine. And since every machine's attachments are predetermined, no machine deserves anything different. Some people may consider the attachments as part of the self, but these change with age. These can get lost with brain damage, while you still remain you. If you define the self as something that can change, well then every moment the self changes. So then there is no actual you. Only a collection of moments within which different versions of you are simulated. So okay, let's go with that. I ask, after admitting that that self, that one unique self, doesn't exist, after I shed every attachment, what is the core after which I no longer exist? What part remains constant as long as I'm still experiencing the world around me? And that is the camera. After shedding personality, the sole difference between me and you is that we are different cameras. Now, our camera's lenses can change in size, for example if I get drunk, or it may shrink dramatically if I magically turn into an insect, but turn the camera off and I'm no longer experiencing. That body and brain is no longer me, even if all the attachments are working fine and I'm going about my day. In this metaphor, the attachments, including the analyzer, are the brain cells themselves. Through genetics and environmental stimuli, we are placed into the brains we have now. But the camera itself is the synapses between the cells, whose interaction results in experiencing. A video camera creates a simulation of the world, just like synapses in the brain. There is no single core camera center within the brain. While there are personality centers and memory centers, there is no experiencing center. The experiencing machine that is you and I, comes into existence through the input of information. Once analysis of information begins, via personality and memory and the like, that's already the attachment starting to work on consciousness. But the camera itself, the experiencing machine, occurs one step before consciousness. While consciousness is the interaction of information, the experiencing machine, that is you or me, is simply the experience of input. Now, each part of the attachments is made from the matter of the universe, with the camera itself being the result of matter experiencing its environment. Different types of matter come together in different arrangement to make different attachments. But it's all just different arrangements of the same thing, matter in the universe. You know, I heard from a friend probably the greatest quote I have heard to this date. You are an aperture through which the universe is looking at and exploring itself. It's brilliant. The universe arranged itself into particles and atoms, which arranged themselves into molecules, which the universe arranged into life. It's truly brilliant. The universe arranged itself into experiencing machines. So next time you fight or fuck or feel any emotion, remember you're just a machine, an experiencing machine. Ask yourself, as an experiencing machine, is what you're doing right now involved in any way with accomplishing the goal that the universe made you for? Are you exploring the universe?